Welcome to the Romantic Wallflowers, a podcast about all our favorite things. Bridgerton, period dramas, and of course, romance.
We're four besties living in 3 countries over 2 different continents with one romance podcast.
I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Emma. And we're usually 4 besties, but right now we're only 2 romantic wallflowers.
We're missing half of our besties. It's so sad. Yeah. But we are excited because today we are kind of shifting away from Bridgerton a lot of it actually. And we're talking about a phenomenal show called My Lady Jane. So Emma, I'm curious, how did you hear about the show and what were kind of like your first impressions?
How did I hear about the show? I think just through social media, the same people that were watching Bridgerton season 3 on Threads started talking about this new show, My Lady Jane, and that's how I saw it. And I'm a sucker for any type of costume drama, and the costumes in that show are just amazing. So all the stills that I were seeing, I was like, okay, I need to watch this. And then a couple of people in the Discord too recommended the show. So yeah, that's how I watched it. I watched it in the mornings one week, and I really regret it because I wish it's a show that you, for cinematic reasons, like you should watch in the evening.
Interesting. I feel like mentally it's very quick, so you need to be like mentally at a place. Like first thing in the morning, it's not like I'm gonna wake up and turn on the TV kind of show. It's like I need to already be awake, have my coffee, like have my brain moving before I even sit down, and I need to like mentally prepare. But it's so good.
How did you watch it?
Oh yeah,
Where did you find it?
I always forget to talk about me.
I know you do. You really do.
I do. So I found it through our Discord, actually. I think Christine had sent the link to the trailer. And the main character, his name is Edward. I'm going to say his last name wrong, but it's Edward Blumel, I think, something like that. And he was in The Discovery of Witches, I love that show.
Still need to watch that show. I really want to watch it.
It's funny. I'm watching it with my sister right now. I actually didn't finish it, but he's so good in that show. He's also in Sex Education as a minor character, and he's so good in that. So, of course, I was like, I want to watch him. And then, kind of like you said, it's a period drama, so I was a sucker for that. But it also looked very, very funny and very quirky, which is 100% my vibe. So I was really excited to watch it. And like I said, when I started it, I was like, this is very quick. Like, it was a little bit overwhelming in the first episode, and I think that was an issue a lot of people had. I know Kay, she was like, I couldn't really get past the first episode, and I get it, because in the first 10 minutes you're like, what is happening? So it's very quick. It's definitely like, it's for the neurodivergent babies, but there's like the neurodivergents who are really good with a lot of chaos, and then there's those who like get overstimulated very easily. So if you're the neurodivergent who has like 1,000 tabs open and
like that's your brain anyway.
Exactly. Like if you can listen to music and watch a podcast at the same time, or like you know, you're really gonna like this show. If you get overwhelmed easily, you're gonna like watch it and stop it, and you're gonna need a minute, because it is very, very fast. If you don't know much about the history, which I didn't going into it, you're like, what is going on? I don't understand any of this. So it was a lot, but I really enjoyed it. It still had that quirkiness, like I said, and the comedy. It's very, very funny in a sometimes dark way, and sometimes a really awkward way, but it's exactly my brand of comedy. I just love it.
The people that are like hardcore and My Lady Jane fans feel exactly the same way. Like it just hits all their spots. Like the people that are obsessed. It's not a show, I feel like, that a lot of people are just like idly watching. It's either you're in it or it's not for you.
Exactly. It's not a background show. There's a lot of shows
No.
we love. I know, especially because so many of us Bridger stands have been trying to like get Bridgerton's numbers up for the, you know, the Nielsen ratings or whatever. And so people are like, oh yeah, I just put it on in the background and I do work. Like, you can't do that because everything goes so fast and it escalates. You're gonna miss so much. Fast. I watched it twice. I live threaded it on our threads. Shout out to our threads. Go check us out there.
Yes.
And like, even in the first 5 minutes, I was like, oh, I didn't even notice that. Like, that actually helps me understand so much better this time around. So it is one I recommend. Watch it a couple times. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I'm the neurodivergent who needs a lot to really keep me entertained. So
So one thing I think when you first start watching it, you're hit with a couple of different things that can either help or do the opposite of helping when it comes to concentrating on the plot, which is there's a narrator and then there's music that is there's a word for it, but it kind of overpowers a lot of the scenes. And I know that the fans of the music in the show, like, they love that. They love that part. Me personally, it's not, first of all, my type of music, and I found it to be a bit disturbing. And it's not because it's like modern music in a period drama. I have no problem with that, but it's just the type of music for me. But what did you feel like? Because I feel like, both of those things are gonna hit you in the face as soon as you watch it.
Yeah, so I am a huge fan of the narrator. He is very funny. He very much breaks the fourth wall. Especially because, again, you're dropped into the middle of the story that you really have to keep up with. So he kind of helps. There's one scene in particular, and I don't want to spoil it, but he explains there's a fantasy element, and he explains what the fantasy element is. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, because at first you're like, am I supposed to know, like, what's happening here? Like, I will spoil a little. A lady turns into a bird, and you're like, what the hell?
What happened?
Like, is this, because they don't advertise it that way at all, which I'm going to talk about later. But the narrator, I love everything about him. He's so funny. He has a very dry wit. He's definitely talking to us as a 21st century audience. And so there's a lot of things he says that's so funny. Like, there's one episode where he's talking about the main male character, and he said, you know, if Guildford were alive today, he would go to therapy, but alas, this is, you know, whatever year. And so they don't have therapy. And I'm like, that's funny. Like, that to me was top tier. Music wise, I agree. It does get very loud and very overpowering, but it's a lot of like rock covers. So I think I read from one of our Discord members that all of the songs are sung by women. And I think, I could be wrong, and I'm sure I will be corrected on this if I am wrong, but I think the music director was a woman. Like, everybody involved in the music.
It would not surprise me because the whole team is so female-led.
Very female, which I love. But so it has like a lot of songs that I listened to in the car with my dad when I was a kid, but they're all covered and updated, which I love a good cover. So, you know, there were parts of it that I did love, but I do agree, like, there were parts where I'm like, this is very loud. And now I'm like past the point of overstimulation because everything is hitting you all at once. But I thought there were some really good beats. There were some really good moments where the music is just like elevating the story to a very high level. And I did like that. But I definitely agree there were some parts where it was like, I need to turn my TV down. Like, this is too much. But,
so for you, it was a show that you just immediately loved.
I loved it. I think part of me too loved it because I was like, I feel the need to keep up with this show. But I know you have some criticisms, and I would love to hear your criticisms because you know me, I'm always like, everything is flowers and rainbows and it's so good. And then you like, someone will point something out. Right. And then someone's like, well, actually, I didn't like this. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. That's such a valid criticism.
We're right about you.
It's my favorite part about you guys that you're always like, well, actually, because I love different perspectives.
Exactly. I mean, there are so many things that I love about the show. There are definitely things that I didn't like, but I feel like the things that I didn't like could all be fixed by it getting renewed and having more money, getting more feedback from fans. Like, it felt very much in some ways like a first season, which is fine. You know, if I start binging a show with 5 seasons, the first season is very different from season 5, you know? So I am so sad that they're canceled despite having criticism of the show. What really makes the show for me are all the characters. The criticisms that I do have is all about like the show making. So like I don't vibe with the music. That's just like a personal style, which is fine. I don't like the narrator, really. I don't mind that there is a narrator and some of the things he says are funny. A lot of the times I do feel like he's just explaining exactly what happened in the scene that we've seen, and I don't kind of like being spoon-fed that way.
That's totally fair.
Yeah, but it's such an iconic opening of like the first episode where he's like, this happens to, you know, Lady Jane. Well, fuck that. Like, that is an iconic opening to a world and a universe, and it sets up everything so well. So I'm not against him completely. There's just like a little bit of a vibe difference.
Sure.
But one thing that I really love about the show is obviously it's female led, and they're just like humbling the female characters straight away. Like, they make them all with both flaws and strengths, which I really like. One of the funniest scenes for me is like she runs away because Jane is being married off, right, by her mother. So she runs away with her, what would you call her, lady's maid or something? Maid. And it's just like a show of privilege that she has that the lady's maid doesn't. I forget her name. Her name is Susanna. So Jane's family catches them, so they never run away together.
Right.
But she doesn't realize that the implications are worse for her. Like, let Susanna then get the blame of, you know, kidnapping Jane, essentially, because Jane can't do anything wrong. Right. So I love that, like, humble moment straight away. She's extremely smart, but that doesn't mean that she's, like, flawless. So I love all the characters in the show. Edward is another one of my favorite. Like, as soon as he came on screen, I was like, I love you.
Yes. Now, to be clear, because on Threads I kept getting it mixed up, do you mean Edward the character or Edward the actor?
The character. The character. Yeah, the king. Yeah.
We're on the same page, yeah. So for those of you listening / watching, Edward, it's King Edward, and I forget the actor's name. He's phenomenal. He's so good. And then Guildford is like the main male lead, and he's played by an actor named Edward. So sometimes on Threads, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I love Edward. And then someone's like, yeah, me too. But they were talking about the actor. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about King Edward. Like, he's so funny. So we'll keep the characters' names for the sake of this podcast because it's confusing. But I wanted to say, because you mentioned like the humbling of women from the beginning, and that's so interesting because this is set, I think, like 200 years before Bridgerton, maybe a little bit more. And so it's just so interesting because when you view it from a 2024 female perspective, no matter, like, you can go back 50 years because women empowerment is still so new that you're going to watch something where there's still kind of this oppressive nature, like, okay, go to the 50s, your place is in the home, you know, your job is to raise the kids, we don't want you in the office place. Go back 100 years, you're not allowed to talk about any sort of politics, like, we don't want to hear your voice, you're just, you know, again, your job is to run the home. You go back to these times, and like you said, one thing we see in this show that we don't necessarily see as much in Bridgerton, because you have to bring it all back to Bridgerton, is the class difference. Because, you know, I think about this a lot with Penelope, for instance, in Bridgerton. We love Penelope so much, but her class, like if she were like 2024, she's so much richer than we will ever be.
Oh.
Like she's so much more
yeah.
privileged. And it's
Yeah.
easy to forget when you're watching from the perspective that everybody is part of that class. Like it's easy to forget, like, I'm never going to actually
It's a show
relate
about
to this
billionaire
person.
landlords.
Exactly. So having that perspective of having Jane, who is, you know, the daughter, she's the cousin of the king. I don't know what her father's title was, but she's the cousin of the king. So she comes from a huge place of you know, class elevation, of privilege. We know they don't have a lot of money, and that's a major point in the plot. Before like the you know, new lord comes in to take over the place. Like the women don't have a lot of money, and so the mother does a lot of scheming, as does Portia Featherington. I compare them a lot because they do a lot to secure their daughter's place in society and their name in society, which I think is so beautiful to see. Because again, from a 2024 lens, you and I as women, we have a lot more power than these women had, and the only way they could really gain power is to take it from others, to kind of manipulate and kind of worm their way into things, which makes these very morally gray and flawed characters that you really root for, because you're like, you go girl, like you do what you gotta do. But then you have like Susanna, these women who are low class, who really, again, are probably more relatable to us, because if we were in that time period, we would probably be ladies' maids, or
which reminds me of, like, speaking of Bridgerton again, but one of my favorite things that Nicola says in an interview, because she's being asked, like, who would you be in the Regency era, and she's like, are you kidding me? I would be an Irish peasant with bad teeth.
Exactly. Yes. So, and there's a point, I think, maybe like episode 4 or 5 in My Lady Jane, where Jane gets a ransom letter for Susanna, her lady's maid, who's run away. And she's like, I have to go save her. She's my friend. And then she gets to Susanna and finds out, like, Susanna really was just trying to hustle her out of some money. And she's like, oh, I thought you were my friend. And Susanna said, I wasn't your friend. I worked for you. Like, you don't know anything about me. Yeah. Like, she really, again, she humbles her. She reads her to filth.
Yeah. And as she should.
Yes. And it's like, right. Like, again, the character we're rooting for really, to us, is not so relatable, because she does have a lot more wealth and class status than we're ever going to have. But I like that Jane is very teachable. And that exact moment, she's like, you're right. Like, I want to know more about you. I have viewed you as a friend, but I haven't been a friend to you. And I love that it doesn't take, like, okay, well, now I need to go home and think about what you said. Like, it's an immediate, you're right, I messed up. I'm going to change my behavior. And I think that's why Jane is someone that you really root for, because she learns about people's struggles, and she's like, I want to do something to help you. So we get to the main plot point, and this is huge spoiler. So stop listening if you don't want spoilers.
Stop listening. Yeah.
But the fantasy element is that there are these characters called Ethians. And Ethians are humans who can turn into animals. And they're viewed very much as second class, not even like third, fourth, fifth class citizens. They are kind of thrown out of society. They should be exterminated. Exactly. Yeah. It's really interesting because, you know, if you want to compare it to actual life, you know, you think of like Hitler and the Jews, or, you know, America and all of the civil rights movements we've had. They really, like, they demonize this group of people. They don't understand them, which, again, very, very true to all of our, like, actual world history. They don't understand them, or they don't agree with them. So the majority decides to punish them and sends them, you know, out of the kingdom. They're exiled. And so it forces them to, you know, really steal for what they can get because they're not allowed to be part of society. There are laws that you cannot marry an Indian or you will be put to death.
Yeah.
And it's, you see, again, this class struggle where when you exile someone, when you mark them as not worthy, they have to become what you fear they are because they have to become criminals because there's no other way for them to legitimately live in society and have food, have shelter, have their like basic needs met. And when Jane realizes this, what I love is she's like, okay, this is stupid. We're gonna fix this. Because
and now she is in more power than before.
Yes. So she becomes the queen. And this is historical that King Edward died and she was the queen for one day. And again, I don't know much of the history. Do you know much of like the actual real history?
I read up about it when I was watching the show. But my memory is so bad.
That's fair. I think in real life, like the Athenians were Catholics, maybe.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, because what I do know off the top of my head is Henry VIII, I believe. Again, someone correct me if I'm wrong. He was the one with all the wives, right? She's gonna Google it. She's doing a Google.
I'm going to go into my own blog post because I did write a summary.
Perfect.
Let me see.
Because yeah. So he, was married and he wanted to divorce his wife, and the Church of England, or maybe I'm getting it backwards, but whatever church he was part of, they're like, no, we're not going to allow you to get a divorce. So then he created his own church, maybe something like that. Again, I might be having it mixed up. I will go to your blog post, but he had 6 wives, as we know from the musical Six. But yeah, so we have this interesting thing where they've kind of taken a stand-in for what really was happening and kind of swapped out like the actual class of people for these Indians.
Basically, what I wrote is the characters are based on real-life historical figures during the Tudor period in England. Lady Jane Grey, she's real. Her mother, Lady Frances, she's real. Lady Catherine, her sister. Her sister, Lady Mary, is renamed for the show to Lady Margaret. Gotcha. I'm guessing to avoid confusion. Her husband, Lord Guildford, and his father, John. And of course, King Edward VI and his sister, Queen Mary I. King Edward VI named Lady Jane Grey, his cousin, as the heir, before passing away at 15 from a fever and a cough. She then rules for 9 days before getting executed on orders from Mary. That's all I wrote.
That's fair.
But listen, this show is not about historical accuracy, and they make that very clear.
That's right. They sure do. They rewrite history. But it is interesting because I know there's a lot of people who are obsessed with the Tudor period. Personally, I am not. And so I was talking about this with my sister because, again, we're watching A Discovery of Witches, and there is basically the whole second season, the 2 main characters kind of go back to like Tudor era London. And it's boring. Like, that era to us, we're like, we want the Bridgerton era. Like, we want the bright colors and the balls. It's so dark.
I love the Tudor.
It's just not for me,
It's fine. That's fine.
Exactly.
It is very dark, and I think the show does a good job of showing that.
Yes.
One of my main criticisms of the show is the cinematography, which is weird because I do love the cinematographer. She's the same cinematographer that was for The Great, which is a very bright show. I don't know if you watched The Great.
I've seen
also
a couple
like a history.
Yeah.
But this show for me, first of all, it was a little bit too dark, which is fine because it's about a dark subject.
Right.
But there was this glow about.
Interesting.
Like they put on like a filter. It looked like a Vaseline on the lens or something like that. And that really bothered me because the main reason, like, I love the plot, love everything else. But the main reason I watch this show, I'm going to be so real, are for the costumes.
Fair.
So if I don't see them in detail, and these costumes are so beautiful. Like, some of the dresses that Jane wears, her mother wears, are like, oh, they're so stunning. At best, too. Like, oh my god. So I wanted to really just watch that almost in slow motion. Like, I wanted the clarity.
Right.
And I didn't feel like I got that with the cinematography in the show, unfortunately. Whereas, like, I love the on-set pictures, the behind the scenes, because I can see everything so clearly.
Interesting.
But,
I'll have to go back and take a look. I'm sure I'll watch this show with my sister because she has not seen it.
Yeah.
I make sure she sees everything because I have to have someone to talk about it with. And also we need the numbers up because we would like to save the show, which again, we'll talk about.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about it. But before we get there, I want to ask, who was your favorite character? And I'm putting you on the spot, so I'm sorry.
No, that is all good. Margaret, obviously.
Okay, Margaret's the best.
Margaret's the youngest sister, and she's just so badass. And even just letting a young actor play that role and have the lines that she has is pretty badass.
Yes.
And she's even being given an arc, which I find is very interesting. She's not just the bratty young sister.
Exactly.
You get to see, I'm not going to try to spoil it, but you get to see how she's also punished for, being a young woman, from her mother and others. So it's, you see where it's coming from. She's not just this by nature, let's say that.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned before, I do love King Edward. He's just so warm. I just want to be his friend. Like, I can so see why, like, Jane and him get along so well. And Stan. I love Stan, which is Guildford's brother. And just his introduction, and then how he's like so in love with Jane's mother. But then still, like, that's not enough for him to go all like abandoning his own family's brother and those
his
ideals
own beliefs too. Yeah.
I just love it, because in the beginning you're like, okay, this is just like a bratty spoiled kid, but no, it turns out that even he has depth, which I love it. Yeah,
I love that too. Just about the show in general is that no character is one-dimensional. Even I would say probably Mary is the least dimensional, because she does have one specific goal and she doesn't really have
she's so good.
She is so good, but in terms of a villain, like, I do love a good origin story, or like I just get like a tiny bit, but
and
overall,
you know what,
she's just
isn't
the bad
the books
guy,
yeah, but aren't the book series, so this is an adapted work from one book, from what I understand, and then there's one more book about Jane, and then there's also books about Mary. Is that correct? Or
I think, from what I understand, each Jane book is about a different Jane. So
okay.
So My Lady Jane, I think, is the only one that's like My Lady Jane. But then I think there's a book about Mary, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that one just came out. And it's the only other book that like relates to this world, which is interesting because again, I haven't read the book, but from what I understand from a lot of people, the book is very complete. It doesn't feel like it needs more, like it doesn't need a sequel. They set up the show to be
yes, because I've heard it wasn't even the full first book.
Right. That could be.
That's so annoying.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna, with that, I'll tell you my favorite character, and then we'll get into the cancellation, which is very important, and one of the reasons we're doing this. My favorite character is the narrator.
I love it.
And it's, again, because he's got such a dry wit. He is exactly my brand of comedy. I love kind of the whimsicalness. We're going to talk about this in a future episode, but a movie I hate is Ella Enchanted. But they have a very similar narrator, which I like. I love a funny narrator. I love a narrator that breaks the fourth wall. who, again, it's like, it's almost like you're watching it with your best friend and you're like having a conversation, a one-sided conversation with the narrator. So I just thought like he was really well written. I even tweeted to the show creator that like if she needs someone to write
who
for
follows
him,
us, by the way.
Exactly. She follows us on Threads, so hopefully she watches this.
Yes.
But if she needs a writer for the narrator when we save the show, just hit me up because I would I'll even do it for free. So if not, I'll just make a fan fiction and I'll make the narrator a character.
Love it.
But that leads us to the fact that the show is canceled very quickly after it came out. Yeah. So the thing that I don't understand is that, for instance, with Netflix, and especially because, you know, we've been watching Bridgerton and we've been watching these numbers, they have 90 days to see how many views they can get. The show was canceled within a month, and I don't understand how they could make that decision, because that's not a long time. That's number one. It's a very short amount of time for people to watch, especially because some people, again, they need a little time to process, you know, because it's very quick. So I imagine some people who are more stable than I am were like, I'm not going to watch all 8 episodes in one sitting. But, you know, if you think about it that way, it will take someone maybe 8 days to watch the series.
Oh, yeah,
if they watch
for sure.
one episode.
Yeah.
So how can we say after 30 days? Like, I just simply don't understand it. But I have a theory. And that theory is Amazon was never going to renew the show.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, because for those of you who don't know, I'm a marketer by trade. And you don't put something out there that you want to succeed without putting tons of marketing dollars on it. So like, look at Barbie. Barbie the movie spent millions of dollars on their marketing, and like that's we could have a whole like PhD thesis on Barbie's marketing.
Yep.
We didn't even hear about this show very much. Like, I saw a trailer after it was shared in the Discord. You saw it on Threads. Like, I'm on Amazon all the time, and I never saw an ad for this show. So I think that they didn't throw the money at it because they expected it to fail, and then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you're not going to pay the advertising dollars, then the show's not going to be viewed by as many people. And how, you know, and then they can say, well, we didn't have as many views, so that's why we canceled it. But again, it's such a short period of time. Like, to me, it would have been nicer if going in, Amazon had said, hey, this sounds like a cool show. I don't think we're going to do more than a season. So let's have a full story that gets completed, which they kind of do. They do leave some loose ends, but I don't think Amazon did that. I think just from what I can tell, I think Amazon's like, okay, well, let's see how it goes. And then like they're over in the corner having conversations like, let's make sure this show doesn't perform well so that we don't have to renew it. Because you have to imagine it's a very expensive show to produce. You know, you have
one of the like even just the costume again. Like,
exactly. So if that really like it pisses me off because I think that's very shady. So the fans were not happy at all, especially again because it was such a short period. It had no time to be great. So a few people started a petition, which I believe now has over 50,000 signatures. And it's been like 3 weeks since the petition came out. It has exploded. So many more people have
so
watched
many people
the show.
are watching. Yes.
Exactly.
Lilacs.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Lilacs, by the way, is a joke in the Discord. And you have to join the Discord. We're not going to explain it to you.
Love it.
I know we're petty. Yeah, you're gonna have to be part of the community.
I want to see lilacs in so many other parts of my life. It's actually ridiculous
all the time. And then I'm like, okay, I do have to explain this to like my friends because they're like, do you have like word vomit? What's happening? But yeah, so I don't know if the show's gonna be renewed because TV places are very shady, but we know that there is a market for this kind of show. We've seen it. And we'll talk about that too a little bit more when we go into the close. But I'm curious because you said that this feels like a first season of a show and that there are storylines that you want to see wrapped up. So tell me, if you can, and maybe spoilers here, what would you like to see summed up?
So from what I know from reading spoilers, so again, if you do not want to know, but again, realistically, will this show be renewed? The likelihood is very, very small. Right. So saying that, from what I know, well, first of all, will Edward, what's his Ethian
exactly
animal? I don't know if that's a term they use, but what's what's his shape? What's his and I've also heard that Jane herself is also Ethian.
Really?
Yeah, dropping bombs. So that would, I'm pretty sure I've read that, and I would, love to see that. And obviously, I just want to see more. So, again, spoilers, but towards the end is really when you see Jane and Guildford finally getting together. So I just want, same as in Bridgerton, we're all romance girlies. Yes. We want to see them having happy times together. Yes. They can struggle with something else, but not when it comes to them being together, and 100%. I would love to see more about Bess, honestly. And I think she does have a bigger part in the books. Again, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. And we see they do this quick little, thing at the end where they're like, these are things that are happening to set up kind of another season, another potential season, where we see that Bess is Ethian, and I think she's a fox. And that's like, whoa, where did that come from? Like, that was completely out of the blue. So I would love to see more of that in season 2. There's also this whole thing that they never really wrap up, where Edward's grandma is alive. Yeah. And, like, they all thought she was dead. She's alive. She, like, runs a weird Ethian convent. And it's all very strange and not, like, super explained. But the thing is, there's a plot, from what I can understand, where she's trying to bring an end. What do they call them? The people who aren't Ethian. I can't remember. There's like a word. But anyway, she's trying to...
I don't remember either.
Yeah, she's trying to, like, basically make them extinct. Like, basically a genocide for the non-Ethians. So on one end, you have the people who are like, we want all the Ethians to die, and then on this end, we want all the non-Ethians.
Can we all just get along? Yeah.
Right. So it's never, like, it's just a brief conversation. Like, it's never super fleshed out, and I think that is something that will come, or would have come, hopefully might come if we get a second season. Also, there's something with Spain where the Spanish are trying to get rid of, or they have gotten rid of all their Ethians. The Spanish prince sends Queen Mary, like, a hand, and it has a ring on it. So there's something, like, with an alliance between England and Spain, which, again, could be historical. I have no idea. And then there's also...
People are not listening to this podcast for history. There are a ton of history podcasts out there.
And that's so true. And then there's also the threat of a war with Scotland, because the Ethians believe that Scotland is going to be more accepting of them. And so they're
could be the Catholicism then that you were talking about before.
Exactly. So they're expecting that Scotland is going to come to their aid so that they can fight against the monarchy. So, and then of course there's Jane and Guildford, not only, like, their romantic relationship, which, yes, like, I'm so tired of, like, these shows where the angst is the whole show. And then you get, like, show. 10 seconds of happy. Like, I want, like, 7 and a half episodes of happy and 1/2 episode of angst. It's too much.
Listen, Yes, we can. That should be an episode in itself. Honestly,
yes,
yeah.
It probably will be down the road.
Yeah.
But I want to see too how she's going to fight against Mary, and how we leave Edward in a place where nobody, like very few people, I should say, know that he's alive. So
and he's got a romance.
He's got a romance with Fitz, and they're very cute.
I love him. I love Fitz. Yes. Is that his name? Yeah.
Yeah, they're so cute together. And it's so funny because, again, I know we're not a history podcast. I don't know if there was ever any inkling that King Edward was gay, but he did die very young. But it's really cool to see a very open and out monarch. And he's a black man, so that just adds to the kind of inclusion on the show. And I love that. I think, again, like Bridgerton, they do kind of have a lot of diversifying characters who are traditionally white, and I think it makes it fun. It could also be part of the reason that people didn't like it, because they're prejudiced, and that is wrong. It's wrong. You should not be prejudiced. That's all I'm going to say about that.
No, for sure. I feel like this happens a lot with fantasy shows and historical fiction, where they have been criticized for not pushing the envelope. So they're pushing the envelope, and then they're being criticized. So it's, it's a you cannot win type of situation. Exactly. But people in general with adaptations, or like this show from the get-go says it's a fantasy. Yes. So if you're not into fantasy, then don't watch the show. Exactly. But also, just put it on in the background so that it doesn't get canceled.
Exactly. Well, it's already canceled, but we can save it.
It's already canceled.
So with that being said, sign the petition for sure. I think it's SaveMyLadyJane.com. And they're doing some amazing things. There are some really fun creators who have taken part in this. But one thing I want to talk about as we close, we would love to see My Lady Jane saved. But if it's not, I would love to see more shows similar to this. But there's got to be, again, the right advertising, the right market for it. And it reminds me, and I mentioned this earlier, that there are networks that create these shows and do it very well, and there is a huge following. So I think specifically of Game of Thrones. Now, not quirky, not comedy, but it's a fantasy show that a lot of people are into. So I think there has to be a huge market of romantasy lovers that are just not being served, because again, these networks are just like, I give up. I don't want to do romantasy. It's too hard. But HBO has proven it's possible. Also, is it Stars that does Outlander?
I think PBS, Stars. Both PBS and Stars, though, are investing. And, they're the ones that, if you're subscribed to any type of streaming service, like, they are the ones that show, like, period dramas and things like that.
Exactly.
And, I mean, that's all we talk about. That's all, like, on the Discord, that's all we talk about. So, like, there is,
and we're almost 600 growing, people strong. So.
Exactly, we're growing so much. So, like, these are the people. Like, if I were to make a show, even as someone who's not a fan of, let's say, anything, I'd focus on the people that would spend money, which is like women who are into romance.
We're important
like, let's
too.
Be so real.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just think with the cancellation of the show, as someone who, this wouldn't be like my top 5 shows, but that's fine. I still am pissed off that it was cancelled, and I would love to see more of the show. And I think it's especially frustrating because it is not only a female-led show when it comes to like the characters and the actresses and stuff like that, but also the crew behind it. So the writers, the cinematographer, they're, like you said, I think the production designers also, but the set decorator, like it's the whole thing is full of women making a show,
right?
And I feel like historically, men have been giving so much money to just be mediocre at something. Like, they create so many shows and that get renewed and no one says anything. Not many people watch it, but, you know, they're just like, oh, we'll just give you another shot. But when a woman creates something, it needs to be top level or you're getting cut, you know? And it's just give us a chance to be, like, good but not perfect at something. Like, how else are we supposed to get better if we're not being given the opportunity to kind of, I'm not saying that My Lady Jane sucks, but like, we need to suck at something in order to be good at something. But if we never get those opportunities, like, I went to film school and I saw this over and over again, how, you know, guys were automatically assumed to be better at stuff simply because of their gender, meaning the girls never got experience to just be kind of shitty stuff and then improve, you know?
Right. If you're not
so it's just frustrating.
It is. And
what's that show that you watched that just got canceled?
Renegade Nell. I was going to talk about that as well, because that's another show that I feel I haven't seen much of a romance aspect, so it's mostly fantasy, but it is a woman-led show. The main character is a woman. It has her two younger sisters. It has a lot of, to me, like, some similarities with My Lady Jane, just in terms of the main characters. But it's definitely, like, heavy fantasy. It's very dark. It actually, like, I'm watching it, like, why did Disney make this show in the first place? Because
I want to watch it now.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like anything I've ever seen Disney do. But again, I'm like, this would be a great HBO show. Like, this, or Stars or Showtime. Like, this would make an amazing show. I think the audience is there. It has kind of the same, like, energy and feel of, like, Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a very, but women led. So it's fun, it's adventurous. Louisa Harland, who is best friends with Nicola Kaufman, everything has to be Bridgerton. She's phenomenal. I mean, she is 10 out of 10. The only other thing I've seen her in is Dairy Girls, where she talks very slow.
She's a bit,
and she's very, like, a little bit, like, not smart. She's smart, she's witty, she's a badass. I mean, she is very, there's no problem that comes to her that she's not like, I can solve, and I love that. And it also is during a time of a female monarch. It's Queen Anne in the show. So to me, there's a lot of similarities in the subject matter, in the way the show is led, in the, you know, the fantasy element, and then in the cancellation. It's really dumb that they canceled these shows. So
I know.
I think you'd probably like Renegade Nell a little bit more. I think it's also a lot more linear than My Lady Jane. It's much easier to follow. But yeah, I really like it, and I'm really tired of getting, like, emotionally invested in things that don't get more time, because it's so good. It's so well done. And again, I think it probably comes down to money, but Disney has put out a lot of crap.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
You know, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, God, we didn't need, no offense anyone, we didn't need 5 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and we definitely don't need a reboot. But I digress.
So true.
But there's a lot of great historical shows out there. I don't know if you've ever seen Dickinson. That
about really Emily Dickinson?
That's a great show.
I haven't seen it. I want to watch it.
TV, yeah. I'm trying to think. Obviously, like, Outlander comes to mind. I've actually never seen it. But I know that's a huge, you know, romantasy show that people love. Obviously, Bridgerton, not romantasy, just romance, but we always have to play
in a way
Bridgerton.
Romantasy, because is it historically accurate? No.
Yeah, but there's no, like, actual, like, fantasy elements, but the fantasy is, like, I want to be in Bridgerton.
Penelope's acrylic nails. How is that not a fantasy element?
That was magic. All of her hairstyles, like, Ray obviously is a witch, because Could you imagine if, like, season 4, they're like, screw everything. This is full romantasy. We're gonna make Sophie, like, we're gonna make her stepmom, like, an actual real witch.
It's gonna be an actual pumpkin there that she's going,
let's do full Cinderella with a fairy godmother.
Why not?
We're
already pissing people off.
Everybody
so
would
why
watch
not?
it anyway. Like, it'd probably be the highest grossing season. Like, we never had fairies before, but you know what? I'll allow
You
it.
know what?
You know?
For sure. So
let's get.
I have a question for you
tell me.
to end on a good note.
Yeah.
So we're pissed off about the cancellation. We're pissed off at networks not giving money to female-led shows.
Yes.
Saying that, we love romance. In My Lady Jane, what was the most romantic scene to you? Like, what gave you the most amount of butterflies?
Oh man, now I'm on the spot. I can't decide because there's so many different romances between different characters.
Yes.
But I think it has to be something with Edward and Fitz.
Ooh.
I have to, like, I can't think of a specific scene, but just the fact that Edward, there's a funny scene where Edward sees a woman naked, and the narrator's like, and this was the moment Edward knew that he was not attracted to women. So to see him fall for a guy who, again, he's low class, like he's part of the, I don't know, I don't think they call them low
Benedict
class,
and Sophie.
but exactly, it's Benedict and Sophie. He is, again, he's Indian, so he's been forced his whole life to kind of be a criminal, to be an outlaw. And to see Edward come around, like Jane did, come around to the idea that everything he knows is wrong. And just see him kind of fall in love with this guy. I just love, I think their whole romance gave me butterflies. Like, every time they were together, I'm just like, yeah. But if I had to pick a Jane and Guilford moment, I think the scene where he comes, well, God, first of all, the last scene where he's like burning, and she kisses him, and then he turns into his horse form, like, it, that ended me. But the scene where the night before her trial, he sneaks into her bedroom. So sweet. And he's like, run away with me, I'll save you. And she's like, I'm gonna save myself, but it's sweet that you came. But then she tries to get him to leave to save him. Like, it's just this moment where they both know they're in love with each other. I don't think they've said it yet, and they show it to each other, you know? Like, I'm proving through my actions that I'm in love with you. And that's
so sweet. I love how you put that.
They're sweet. So what about you? What was your butterfly moment?
Okay, my butterfly moment as a horse girl was
LOL.
This show is for the horse girls. When Guilford he's kidnapped the word, he gets someone takes him somewhere.
Yeah.
And then he, as a horse, runs back to Jane.
Yes.
And there's this, like, you know, he just runs over a hill in horse form, so it's not even like a human at the time. But it's just so romantic. Like, first of all, horses are just so romantic. So him being a horse, and it's one of my favorite things about the show is we talked about a little bit in the beginning, but like Edward's social media presence and how much he is into Guilford and the show and what he posts about, just like the horse aspect of the show. It's just hilarious to me.
It's amazing.
And I don't know, just anyone running just to save the one that they love is just,
it's like in The Lion King when Simba's running back to Pride Rock and there's that whole like montage. I'm sorry, Simba.
No,
Simba
I know
was
what
on
you
my
mean.
Crush presentation. We did a Crush presentation.
That's true.
It's I don't know why, but you're right. Running is so romantic, and a horse running, for whatever reason,
it's the urgency. You know what I mean? It's just like
A car will never. A car could never make me feel those butterflies.
It's not. Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah,
not at all. Anyway, well, thank you to the creators and the writers and the actors and all the people involved in My Lady Jane. You did a great job. I hope that we can save your show, but if not, sincerely, you did so great.
Yeah. And we're excited for whatever comes up in the future for all of the creators and actors.
Exactly. Yes, please, especially to the series showrunners, like, make more shows, because it was so good. And I don't know these people personally, but I hope this experience does not discourage them from making more, because it was different, it was sharp, it was witty, and I think we need more of that. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
And
join our Discord, sign the petition.
Discord. Join us on Threads. Join us on TikTok and Instagram. Real quick plug: I am getting a Bridgerton themed tattoo because we got 1,000 Threads followers before the end of August. If we get 1,000 Instagram followers before the end of October, Queen Bailey is going to get a B tattoo. So please follow us on Instagram so I'm not the only one getting a tattoo. And follow us everywhere else. And we are the Romantic Wallflowers. Thank you so much for listening.